She was betrayed on the worst day of her life. At the exact moment when all she needed was support, affection, truth. But what she received was a lie, coldness, cowardice. This is not just one of many stories of betrayal at the worst time. This is a true story. Intense, disgusting. A story of flaws in the relationship, of emotional abandonment, and of a woman who discovered the hard way that she was alone. Even when people swore their love to her every day. Prepare to hear a painful story. One outburst of a betrayed woman woe not only discovered the betrayal, she discovered that the man who had been sleeping next to her for years was actually a complete stranger. And worse, a coward who didn't think twice before lying to her face, even though he knew what she was going through. This story begins with silence, a silence that screamed. He screamed in the chest of those he trusted. She had already felt that something was wrong. Little signs, subtle changes. The way he hid his phone, the way he got nervous about simple questions. She tried not to believe it. She tried to convince herself that it was all in her head, that the love they had couldn't end like this, with Lee's revealed and disrespect. But her heart already knew. I knew there was something there, ... and that sooner or later it would come to the surface. They had been together for years. He, charismatic, kind in front of everyone. She dedicated, strong, hardworking. The kind of woman you feel proud of just by hearing her story. A warrior, like many women who overcome their own pain to keep a family, a home, a relationship going. What he did, to her, wasn't just cheating. He was choose the most fragile, most painful, most desperate moment to show who he really was. And yet, even after he was caught, he had the courage to lie. He looked into her eyes and lied, as if she were dumb, as if her heart wasn't broken, as if she didn't already know. But the worst was yet to come. Her life was turning upside down, a whirlwind of emotions, pain and loss, all at the same time. She was facing one of the most difficult moments in her life, and all she needed was someone to be there, to hold your hand. That said, it's going to be okay. I'm with you. But he chose another one. He chose cowardice. He chose to hurt a woman who never cheated on him, never disrespected him, never turned her back on him. The truth came like a blow, not only for what he did, but for a day of her life, which he decided to destroy even more with his lie. It is at this point in the story that everything begins to change, because she might even be destroyed inside, but she was not weak, and she decided that he would regret it, not by shouting, not with fights, but with a silent strength. The strength of those who rise from the bottom of the pit and choose to show their worth. And that's what you're going to hear next. You will hear the full story, in her words. One true testimony, painful but necessary. A narrative that shows what many women hide. To miss betrayal, the shock of male infidelity, the wound of heartbreak, and the power to rise again. You will feel angry. You will feel like crying. You'll want to hug this woman? And maybe you will remember something you yourself have experienced. Because the truth is, every woman has been betrayed in some way. For love, for trust, for an unfulfilled promise. And this story is for you. Comment below, what would you do in her place? Have you ever experienced something like this? Do you like real stories like this? Then subscribe to the bell, because the next chapters will give you goosebumps. Now, get ready. In the next part, you will hear her voice and understand, from her perspective, what it's like to be betrayed. On the worst day of your life.
Hello, my name is Rose, and I never imagined that I would experience something as humiliating and painful as what I experienced that day. The day that will forever be remembered as the worst day of my life. But I also never imagined that I would have the courage to tell anyone about all of this. But there came a point where keeping it to myself started to hurt more than talking about it. So if you're listening to me now, thank you. I really do. Because maybe listening to me is what will save me a little from this pain that seems to have no end. Lucas and I had been together for almost 7 years. 7 years of a relationship, of a story that I believed to be solid. We started dating while we were still in college. I was studying physical therapy and he was studying business administration. We met in a study group and we quickly bonded so much that in a short time we were practically living together. We laughed at the same things, liked the same movies, and had the same plans for the future. At least that's what I thought. Over time, we bought an apartment on finance, adopted a little dog that became our favorite, and started talking about getting married. I was always very dedicated to everything they set out to do. I was starting to settle down at the clinic where I worked as a physiotherapist, and he had gotten a good promotion at the company he was working at. Everything seemed to be going well, but it was when my mother got sick that everything started to fall apart. My mother had always been my rock, and then, out of nowhere, she was diagnosed with advanced cancer. It was like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. My routine became hospital, exams, sleepless nights, and desperate prayers. And of course, I needed him. Lucas, at first he seemed present. He would send messages asking how things were going, show up at the hospital some nights with a packed lunch, and say he was there for me no matter what. But that didn't last long. Soon after, he started to pull away. He said he was overwhelmed at work, that he couldn't drop everything all the time. And I understood. I swear I understood. I tried not to demand anything. Everyone was tired, but I started to notice other things. He always had his phone turned down. He left it on silent. He said he was going to bed early, but he stayed online until late at night. I started to feel that something was wrong, but every time I tried to talk to him, he got irritated. He said I was paranoid, that it was the pressure of the situation with my mother that was making me emotionally unstable. And I believed him. Actually, I wanted to believe him, because I was already dealing with so much pain, so many things that were out of my control. Losing him also seemed unbearable, but then the day came. The day my mother passed away, I remember every second of it. The call from the hospital, the drive here, the feeling that my body didn't belong to me. She passed away on a Wednesday morning. Lucas knew. I had warned him that the situation was critical. I called him dozens of times. I sent messages. No response, none. And there I was, dealing with the loss of my mother, with the funeral arrangements, and with an even greater emptiness, that of his silence. At the wake, everyone asked me about him, and I didn't know what to say. I just said that he was having problems at work. A part of me still wanted to protect him. I wanted to justify myself. Hours later at night, he showed up at home. He looked sleepy and hungover. He said he had lost his cell phone and that he couldn't reach me. He spoke with a coldness that cut me to the core. Not a hug, not a "I'm sorry," just an "I heard sorry." That's when something inside me snapped. It wasn't just sadness. It was humiliation. How could someone who claims to love you act like that at a time like this? I started asking questions, and he started lying. So calmly, so peacefully, as if I were an idiot, as if I didn't deserve the truth. He said he was home sleeping, that the perfume smell wasn't mine. He said his cell phone fell in the toilet, but the next day he showed up with the same device, working perfectly. It was from that day on that I started to investigate. Not because I wanted to confirm it, but because I needed to know how far the lie went, and because I needed strength to make the most difficult decision of my life. The following days were a mixture of mourning, despair, and distrust. I could barely cry for my mother because I was trying to understand who the man sleeping next to me was. The Lucas I knew no longer existed, or maybe he never existed. I started to notice that he was leaving the house with increasingly lame excuses. He would say he was going to work and come back smelling cigarettes, something he hated. He changed the password on his cell phone. He stopped looking for me until one night I caught him leaving a bar with someone else. She was blonde, younger, and had her hand on his waist. They were laughing, having fun, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just buried his mother-in-law. As if he hadn't left his wife alone in tatters without ground. He saw me. He turned white. He tried to come and talk to me. But I turned my back. At that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt disgust, a deep disgust for the person he was, and an enormous respect for myself for having resisted so long without breaking down. I left, and there I promised myself he would regret it, not with screams, not with scandals, but with silence. With my absence, with the weight of knowing that he lost someone who would never crawl again for love. In the days that followed that scene at the bar, I didn't say a single word to Lucas, not one. And he didn't try to give me any real explanation either. He put on a ridiculous show, saying it was a colleague from work that they had bumped into each other by chance, that she was going through a difficult time and he was just giving her support. I just looked at her. I didn't even argue, because at that point, there was no point anymore. I knew enough. And what I still didn't know, I was going to find out. I began to move in silence, observing, analyzing, emotionally distancing myself, while on the outside I maintained the same routine because I needed time to get stronger, time to understand the size of the hole he had dug beneath me. I had just lost my mother. The pain was still alive, raw, tearing everything inside me apart. And yet, he thought it was fair to betray me, abandon me, humiliate me. It was in that silence that I made my decision. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to destroy the apartment. I wasn't going to throw his clothes out the window. I was going to make him regret it slowly, painfully, undeniably. He was going to see me leaving. He was going to see me standing up. And worse, he was going to see me better off without him. But first, I needed proof, not for him, but for myself. So that one day, if I ever faltered, I could reread it, remember, it would never be wrong again. And also because, deep down, part of me still didn't believe what I had seen. I wanted to not believe it. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted it all to be a nightmare. I started paying attention to the times, the patterns, the smells on his clothes. I started writing everything down. Yes, I wrote it down. I made a notebook with dates, times, excuses he gave. I saved small details, screenshots of suspicious messages, screenshots I took secretly while he slept with his unlocked phone in his hand. I found conversations with that blonde. He called her an angel. He said our relationship was cold, that I was distant, that life with her was easy. Izzy. The word kept going around in my head like poison. Meanwhile, I continued to be the same on the outside. I cooked dinner. I made the bed. I said good night as if nothing had happened. He believed me, or pretended to believe me, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. Lucas was never good at dealing with guilt. He always avoided things on a tangent. He said he didn't like conflict, but he was a master at causing the biggest. Once, one night, he came home with a gift, a small box. Inside, a golden necklace with a heart pendant. He said it was to make me feel loved. I thanked him, and I kept it. I knew it wasn't for me, that the gift was an attempt to wash away his own guilt. Or worse, that he had bought too and confused the recipients. There was no affection in his eyes. He was afraid that I would find out, and I knew too much. It was during this period that I rediscovered a part of myself that had been forgotten. I started going out alone, going to the movies, to the park, talking more to my friends who he called gossips. I reactivated my personal Instagram, which had been abandoned. I posted discreet photos, smiles on the corners of my eyes, captions, with subtle hints, and he started to notice. He started asking where I was, who I was with, why I didn't tell him. Too late, Lucas, too late. Until the day came when I received the final confirmation. A friend of mine who works at a salon near his work sent me a message. She saw him entering the same bar that night, again with the blonde, and this time they were kissing, without hiding it, without fear, as if they were a couple. And that's when I knew it was serious. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was involved. And worse, he thought he could continue with both of them, that I would never have the courage to leave. So I started planning my exit in silence, like everything up until then. I opened a separate account. I transferred part of my salary to, and I talked to my boss about changing shifts and getting more overtime. I strengthened ties with my aunt, who lived in another city and always offered me shelter. And I started to pack up my belongings little by little. A brush here, an album, there, my mother's letter, which was on the nightstand, until the day I only left behind what I no longer cared about. But before I went, I needed to end the story. I needed to say it, not for him, but for me. So he would know that I knew. And so he would feel what it was like to be left. One Friday night, when he got home from work, I was in the living room, standing with my suitcase next to the couch. He came in smiling with his cell phone in his hand. He must have been exchanging messages with her. He asked if I wanted to order food, and I said, no, I just want you to know that I know about everything, about the blonde, about the dates, about the lies, about the screenshots, about the duplicate necklace. I know, Lucas. He stood there, pale, unsure of where to put his hands. He stammered something like, it's not like that. And I continued, you betrayed me at the worst moment of my life, when I needed support, presence, love the most. And you chose someone else. You chose to hide behind lies while I buried my mother. You have no idea how much that says about you. But now you'll have time to think, because I'm leaving. He tried to argue. He said he still loved me, that it was just a mistake, that I was overreacting. I just took a deep breath. I grabbed my bag, and I said, you didn't lose me now, Lucas. You lost me the day you chose to disappear while I cried. In the hospital, it just took you a while to realize it. I left, and I didn't look back. The feeling of walking through that door with my suitcase was a mix of pain and liberation. I felt like I was leaving behind not only Lucas, but a version of myself that I no longer wanted to carry. The woman who kept quiet, who accepted crumbs, who apologized for feeling too much. That Rose had stayed there on the floor of that room, where I had cried alone so many times. The one who walked out the door was someone else. And even without knowing exactly who I would become from then on, I knew the most important thing. I didn't want to go back. That night, I went straight to my Aunt Patricia's house. She greeted me with such a tight hug that I broke down. I cried like I hadn't been able to cry even at my mother's funeral. It was as if all the pent-up tears were finally allowed to come out. She didn't ask any questions. She just made me some tea, offered me a blanket, and said, you're going to be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but you're going to be okay. And that gave me more strength than any empty words of comfort. The first few days away from Lucas were an emotional minefield. Everything reminded me of him. A smell, a song, even the way the light hit the wall, and even more, guilt. Yes, guilt. As absurd as it may seem, I felt guilty for leaving, for not trying harder, for not fighting. as if the weight of the end was all on my shoulders. And that's when I realized how, for so long, I had learned to take responsibility for everything, even for his betrayal. But I didn't let myself sink. The pain was there, of course, but I had to keep going. I started to reorganize my life. I changed my work shift. I signed up for an online course. I updated my resume. And little by little, life started to move again. Not in a hurry, but steadily. Each small achievement was a victory, a reminder that I existed outside of it. Lucas, of course, tried to contact me, at first with short messages. Are you okay? Do you need something? Can we talk? I ignored them all. Then came the long emails, full of regret. He said he didn't know what he was doing, that he felt lost, that the other woman meant nothing, that he was confused, pressured, and that he thought I didn't need him anymore. I read each line with a calmness that surprised me, because the truth is that I no longer felt anger or hate, only pity, because it was sad to see someone destroy everything good I had with his own hands. Sad to know that even after the pain he caused, he still expected me to comfort him, but I wouldn't, because this time I would choose myself. One day, he showed up at my aunt's gate. I was leaving for work. He looked tired with dark circles under his eyes and a beard that was unshaven. He called me by name in a low voice. Rose, just listen to me, please. I stopped. I looked at him for a few seconds, and I said, there's nothing you can say to me now that will change what you did. He insisted, but I regret it. I'm trying ... I interrupted. You should have thought about it before. At the hospital, at the wake, on the nights. I slept alone, waiting for a message from you. Your regret doesn't comfort me. It only confirms who you are. I turned my back and walked away, trembling inside, but with my head held high. Because even with my heart aching, I knew that this moment was mine, that every word spoken was a liberation, that every step away from him was also a step towards myself. In the days that followed, he kept trying, but I didn't give in, not because it was easy, but because I knew that if I gave in, I would lose myself again. And this time, I wanted to find myself. For the first time in a long time, I wanted to find out who Rose was without him. The Rose who loved dogs, who danced alone in the kitchen, who dreamed of opening her own clinic. The Rose who existed before the betrayal, and who is now rising from the ashes of disappointment. I started writing. Not letters to him, but to myself. Letters that let out everything I felt. I wrote about the good days and the bad, about the triggers that made me cry out of nowhere, about the memories that came like knives, about the fear of never trusting anyone again, and about the silent hope that somewhere in the future I would smile lightly again. Writing became my refuge, my personal therapy. I also started seeing my friends again, the ones Lucas always said were invasive, resentful spinsters, bad influences. With them, I started laughing out loud again, going out without checking my phone every 5 minutes, talking about myself without fear of judgment, feeling like I belonged, that I was loved not because I was Lucas' girlfriend, but because I was myself. And it was to them that I finally told everything, without embellishing, without hiding the ugly details. And do you know what I heard? You were too strong to stay so long. That broke me, because for years I thought the opposite. I thought I was weak for not leaving sooner, for having swallowed so much. But hearing that strength also lies in resistance gave me peace. One night, alone in my room, I opened a little box where I kept some souvenirs. Photos, old letters, travel tickets. And there, in the middle of everything, I found a note from my mother, handwritten in her beautiful, firm handwriting. It said, "Daughter, never settle for less than what makes your heart feel at home." I cried so much reading it because it was as if she were there with me, hugging me and telling me that even without her, I would know what to do. It was then that I knew the worst was over. The pain was still there, yes, but my courage was greater, and my lucidity too. I was no longer the same. I never would be again, and that wasn't a bad thing. It was my chance to start over. I thought the hard part would be leaving, packing my things, facing Lucas, cutting ties, but I was wrong. The hardest part came later. It was dealing with the empty days, with the silence, with the unanswered questions that we insist on asking even though we know they won't lead anywhere, because what hurt the most ... was understanding that it wasn't just him that I had lost. It was the life plan, the expectations, the us that I had imagined for so long. And even though I knew that it no longer existed, my heart took a while to accept it. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and reach for the side of the bed, forgetting that he was no longer there. Sometimes I would still hear a noise on the street and wonder, could it be him coming to look for me? It was as if my body was still on alert, as if I was waiting for something that I had chosen to leave behind, and that confused me. It made me doubt the strength I knew I had, but it also taught me something important, that pain does not follow a script, and that even the best decisions come with wounds. There was one night in particular that left a lasting impression on me. I was sitting on the floor of my room, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last moment I felt truly happy with Lucas. Not an invented or forced happiness, but real. It took me a while. I had to dig deep. And when I found it, it was an old memory from when we still shared noodles on the couch and laughed at silly things, from when life was easy, before the demands, the lies, the distance. And that made me realize that love doesn't disappear all at once. It dies little by little, and we only realize it when we're almost out of breath. It was also during this phase that I started to receive stories. Yes, stories from other women, mutual friends, acquaintances who knew the story, people who came to tell me in secret that they had heard things about Lucas, that he had always had this deceitful way, that some of them had even noticed strange looks, messages at the wrong time. And I asked myself, why didn't anyone tell me before? But the truth is that when we love, we don't listen. And when someone tries to warn us, we close our eyes, thinking it's envy and exaggeration. I myself don't know if I would have believed them. The hardest part of these stories was realizing that I wasn't an exception, that he hadn't cheated on me because he was confused or pressured, as I said. It was standard, repeated behavior. I was just another woman on the list of women he had hurt, and knowing that hurt me in a new way, because it took away from me even the illusion that our story had been special. It was just another well-told lie. Despite this, I kept going, not out of pride, but because I had sunk too low to allow myself to go backwards. I started therapy, reluctantly at first, but I soon understood that it was what I needed. To have a safe space where I could say everything without filter, without fear of judgment. The therapist helped me see things that I didn't want to see, like the fact that I would put myself aside to keep the peace, that I confused love with dependence, that many times I would accept crumbs thinking they were gratitude. These confrontations with myself were painful. There were days when I left the session feeling angry at myself, at him, at the world, but they were necessary. It was like cleaning my soul, and the more I cleaned, the more space I had for myself. It was during this process that an idea came to me that I would never have had before: traveling alone. A weekend, just me, without a very elaborate destination. Just a place where I could breathe different air, sleep without interruptions, walk without a destination. I chose a small town with nature and little cell phone signal. And there, between one trail and another, sitting by a stream, I realized that I was learning to enjoy my own company. That being alone was not synonymous with being lost. It was, in fact, the shortest path to finding myself again. I came back renewed, not cured yet. But with a spark of hope lit, I started to look at myself in the mirror with more affection. I changed my hair. I exchanged old clothes. I cleaned up my social media. I deleted conversations. I archived photos. Everything that, in some way, still held me back. And I imposed a rule on myself. No more stalking Lucas. No more knowing who he was with, where he was, what he posted. Because every time I did that, it was like opening a wound that was already trying to heal. And I didn't want to bleed for him anymore. It was in this atmosphere of reconstruction that one day I received an unexpected message. Not from him, but from the blonde, the woman he cheated on me with. Her name was Bianca, and what she wrote to me left me paralyzed. She said she had found out everything, that Lucas said I was crazy, needy, dramatic, that he was with me out of pity, that he left me because he couldn't handle the emotional pressure anymore, and that now she knew it was all a lie, that he did to her the same thing he had done to me. He disappeared. He lied. He disappeared for days. He came back with excuses, and she had finally understood. I didn't reply, but I read the message about 10 times, not because I was angry with her, but because it was the final confirmation he was exactly who I feared he was. He wouldn't change. And it was never my fault. Bianca was a victim, just like I was, and the cycle repeated itself. Only now, outside of him, I could see everything clearly. And as strange as it may seem, I felt relief. Relief for having gotten out in time, for having broken through, for having had the courage, for no longer being trapped in that chaos. By this time, my feelings for him had already changed. Love had become a lesson, hurt had become a warning, and regret wasn't mine, it was his. Because I kept going, because I was breathing, because I was finally living without asking for permission. After that message from Bianca, everything seemed to fall into place in a way that hurt, but also freed me. I realized that I wasn't the only one suffering because of Lucas's lies, and that made me understand that the problem was never with me. It was him, it always was. And that truth, hard as a rock, was what gave me the strength to move on once and for all. I started to distance myself even further from the past. I canceled commitments that connected me to him, deleted old photos, and ended friendships that existed only because of the relationship. It was as if I was doing a general cleaning, but not only of my physical belongings, but of my mind and heart as well. With each thing I left behind, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Therapy sessions became my safe haven. I talked about everything there without fear, without censorship. I talked about the loss of my mother, the betrayal, the humiliation, and the strength I had discovered within myself. The therapist told me I was on the right path, that rebuilding takes time, and that I needed to be kind to myself. But I wanted more than that. I wanted to be reborn. I wanted to be that woman who doesn't depend on anyone to feel complete. It was then that, almost without planning, I began to dedicate myself to a project that I had put off for years, opening my own physical therapy clinic. I wanted a space where people would be treated with respect, care, and attention, and where I could finally put all my energy into something that was just mine. I worked hard to save money, studied more, participated in workshops, and delved into techniques that went beyond what I had learned in college. During this period, my contact with Lucas was practically zero. He would send occasional messages, some trying to reconcile, others just trying to find out how I was doing. I would respond with few words or simply ignore him, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I learned that in order to protect myself, I needed to set clear boundaries. At work, things started to improve. I was valued, respected, and felt like I was making a difference in people's lives. The clinic I had dreamed of was getting closer and closer to becoming a reality. And with that, my self-esteem started to grow. I was no longer that broken woman, but someone who was rebuilding herself brick by brick with patience and determination. Sure, there were hard times. Days when sadness hit hard, when I doubted myself, when I felt afraid of the future. But I remembered my mother's words and my own promises. I couldn't give up, not now. It was on one of those difficult days that I received an unexpected connection. It was Bianca. She wanted to talk, no longer as a rival, but as someone who had gone through the same pain. We decided to meet at a discreet cafe. It was awkward at first, but we soon realized that we had a lot in common. We shared stories, vented, and even laughed. It was as if together we could heal part of the wound that Lucas had caused. Our friendship grew and strengthened. She became an ally, a confidant, someone who reminded me daily that I deserved better. With her, I learned to forgive, not to take things back, but to free myself from the anger that was consuming my energy. Meanwhile, Lucas went on with his life, or at least I imagined he did. I never again allowed him to occupy any significant space in my mind. Whatever he did or didn't do no longer affected me. As time went by, the clinic opened its doors. It was a dream come true, a symbol of my strength and resilience. Each patient I saw was a silent victory over everything I had been through. With each smile of gratitude, I felt like I was on the right path. Looking back now no longer causes me pain, but rather learning. I know that everything I have experienced has made me who I am. A woman who is not afraid to start over, to fight for her dreams, to love herself above all else. And if there's one thing I've learned from this whole story, it's that betrayal doesn't define who you are. It can break your heart, but it can never destroy your essence. The months that followed the opening of my clinic were a mix of achievements and challenges, a true test of my strength and determination. Each dawn brought new responsibilities, but also new hopes. That space that I had built, brick by brick, became not only a workplace, but a symbol of my ability to overcome. When I saw my patients improving, regaining movement, smiling again, I felt a silent joy that filled all the open wounds of the past. It was as if by helping them rebuild their bodies, I was rebuilding myself. Despite all this progress, I can't deny that some nights were difficult. In moments of solitude, the silence of my house seemed to scream all the doubts that insisted on haunting me. It was at these times that the memory of Lucas came to me with more force, accompanied by a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. Longing, anger, sadness, and even a certain resentment for everything I had experienced. I wondered if things would have been different, if somehow I could have avoided the betrayal. But these questions had no answers, and I began to learn that some facts only serve to strengthen us, not to imprison us. Reconnecting with my family was essential for this emotional reconstruction. My Aunt Patricia became a constant presence, offering unconditional support and listening attentively. Talking to her about my insecurities and fears helped me understand that I was not alone, and that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but of courage. In addition, the presence of my friends, those who are always by my side even when I could not show my vulnerability, reminded me of the value of true connections. Together, we celebrated each small victory as if they were milestones in a new life that was beginning to take shape. My professional life also brought new experiences. I started attending events, lectures, and courses that broadened my vision. and connected me with people who shared the same passion for care and health. Each experience was an opportunity for growth, an invitation to leave my comfort zone and reinvent myself. I learned that the path to overcoming obstacles is not linear, that there are ups and downs, but that persistence is what defines who reaches their destination. However, the calm of my routine was shattered when Lucas reappeared, insistently trying to reconnect. At first, I felt a mix of surprise and discomfort. He sent messages, called, and even showed up in front of the clinic once. I knew I had to keep my distance to protect what I had worked so hard to achieve. So I firmly made it clear that there was no more room for him in my life. It wasn't easy, especially because part of me still felt a glimmer of hope, the foolish hope that things could be different. But at the same time, I knew that the cycle was over. During this time, an unexpected invitation came to me to join a support group for women who have experienced betrayal. At first, I was hesitant. Sharing my story with strangers seemed scary, but I accepted the challenge, and it was one of the best decisions I have ever made. Hearing stories similar to mine, feeling that I was not alone, made me even stronger. In addition, I was able to offer my support and inspiration to other women who were going through difficult times, creating a network of solidarity that helped me to further heal my own wounds. As time went by, I began to notice a profound change in myself. The pain that had once seemed unbearable became a distant memory, a reminder of what I had overcome. The way I looked in the mirror no longer showed insecurity, but determination. My smile was spontaneous again, not forced. I have learned to love myself in a way I never imagined possible. But life, as always, has its surprises. In the midst of this phase of renewal, I met someone who was not Lucas nor a shadow of the past, but a person with whom I could be myself without masks or expectations. Our connection was gradual, built with respect, patience, and sincerity. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could trust again. And this trust was not a leap in the dark, but a conscious choice based on learning and experience. This new relationship didn't erase what I had experienced, but it added new chapters to my story. I was still Rose, with all my scars and achievements, and now with the possibility of loving in a healthy and true way. This taught me that life goes on, even after the most difficult moments, that happiness can rise from the ashes of pain, and that every new beginning is an opportunity to grow. Today, looking back, I feel immense gratitude for everything I have experienced, for the losses, the tears, the betrayals, because they taught me to be strong, resilient, and above all, to love myself. I know the future is uncertain, but I am ready to face it with courage and hope. Life has taught me that rebuilding is not a quick or linear process. It is like climbing a mountain where each step, although exhausting, reveals a new landscape and a different perspective. In the last few months, I have lived this climb intensely. The clinic, which was once just a timid dream, has become a pulsating space of life, healing and hope, not only for my patients, but for myself. Each story I followed taught me something about resilience, about the ability we have to start over. Even when everything seems lost, it was a silent exchange, a cycle of healing where I gave and received at the same time. However, even with my professional and personal growth, some wounds remained open, sometimes throbbing more strongly in moments of silence. Memories of Lucas' betrayal came without warning, invading my thoughts like an unexpected storm. One of those days, while organizing papers at the clinic, I received a message that made me stop for a moment. It was an old photo, a memory of our time together, sent by an unknown number. My heart raced, a mix of nostalgia and pain took over me, but I took a deep breath and deleted the message. I decided that I could no longer let these memories control me. It was during this phase that I met Miguel. He appeared almost by accident in a group of friends, with a calm smile and a light conversation that seemed to be exactly what I needed. At first, I kept my distance. I was afraid of getting involved again, of opening up to someone who could hurt me. But his sincerity, the way he listened without judging, gradually made me let my guard down. It wasn't love at first sight, it was a love built over time, on respect and understanding. He didn't try to fill the voids that Lucas left. On the contrary, he helped me accept those spaces and heal. With Miguel, I learned to trust again, to believe that love can be kind, patient, and true. And it wasn't easy. Each step in this new relationship required courage, because I still carried the scars of betrayal. Sometimes insecurity whispered in my ear, asking if I was ready, if I wasn't making a mistake. But Miguel was always there firm, showing me with his actions that love doesn't need to be perfect, but it does need to be sincere, and that was enough for me. Meanwhile, the clinic grew. I had a dedicated team of professionals who shared the same purpose as me, to care for people with dedication and love. Seeing the team thrive, the patients improve, and the environment transform into a welcoming place was a daily gift. The clinic was not just a job, it was my mission, my legacy, and that strengthened me to face any storm. But life wouldn't be the same without challenges. One rainy morning, I received an unexpected call. It was Lucas. He said he wanted to talk, that he needed to explain himself, that he was sorry for everything that had happened. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, doubt, sadness. I thought for a moment about listening to what he had to say, but then I remembered how much I had suffered. I could no longer allow myself to return to the past that had hurt me so much. I firmly told him that my life had taken another path, that I had found my peace, and that there was no room for him in it. It was a moment of liberation, a definitive closing of that chapter. After that call, I felt a lightness that I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if I had finally closed the last doors that were still ajar, making room for the new. It was at that moment that I realized that self-love is not just a pretty concept, but a vital necessity. Without it, we cannot build healthy relationships. We cannot truly heal ourselves. With the support of Miguel, my family and friends, I continued to invest in myself. I went back to school, specialized, and participated in conferences and workshops. The search for knowledge gave me even more confidence to face the future, and little by little, I allowed myself to dream again, to dream of a full, happy, and balanced life. There were days when sadness still came, when the past seemed to knock on the door, but I learned to welcome these emotions without fear. I no longer ran away from them because I knew that doing so was an essential step towards healing. I allowed myself to feel, cry, reflect, and then move forward with greater strength. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who fought, who fell, but who always got up. I see someone who, despite the scars, shines with a unique light, that light that only those who have faced darkness know. I know that my story is still being written, that many chapters are yet to come, but I am not afraid of what the future holds, because I know that, above all, I am my best company, my greatest love, and my greatest strength. Reaching the end of this story is like closing a cycle that for a long time seemed endless. When it all began, I never imagined that I would be able to face betrayal on the worst day of my life and still find the strength to transform that pain into learning and overcoming. Today, as I write that last chapter, I feel a mixture of relief, sadness, and pride. Relief for having managed to free myself from the chains of lies and betrayal. Sadness for everything I lost and for having trusted someone who didn't deserve it. And pride because I won. I won over myself, I won over fear, I won over pain. After I cut ties with Lucas, life showed me a new path, a path that I myself had to build with great effort. The decision not to seek revenge, not to expose everything so that he would be ashamed, was a conscious choice. I understood that true victory does not lie in humiliating those who hurt us, but in rebuilding our own happiness and showing, through the lives we lead, how strong and capable we are. This was my way of making him regret it, not with words or confrontations, but with actions that reflected a woman who is not shaken by betrayal, who does not allow herself to be less. These were difficult months with ups and downs. I learned that the healing process is not a straight line, but a roller coaster of emotions. There were days when I missed someone so much, doubt crept in, and the desire to go back came. But in those moments, I remembered everything I had been through, how that betrayal destroyed me, and I chose to stay strong. I chose to love myself. Above all else, I chose freedom. My relationship with Miguel was fundamental in this process. He was not a savior, but a companion who respected my time, my scars, and my internal battles. With him, I rediscovered the pleasure of trusting, of surrendering myself without fear, of believing that love can be healthy and true. He showed me that I didn't need to carry the weight of the past forever, that I could open myself to the new, without losing my essence. But the biggest lesson I learned was about myself. I discovered that I am stronger than I imagined, that pain, no matter how intense, can be a springboard for evolution. That betrayal, no matter how cruel it may seem, can be the turning point that forces us to look within, rebuild ourselves, and reinvent ourselves. I learned that self-love is the basis of everything, that without it, no relationship can survive, no lasting happiness. Today, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a victim, but a warrior. I see a woman who fell, but got up with courage and dignity, who lost someone who didn't value her but gained herself, who experienced one of the greatest pains a human being can feel, but didn't let it define her future. What did I do that made him regret it? I lived. I became the best version of myself. I took care of my body, my mind, and my soul. I restarted my dreams, which he tried to destroy, and I achieved achievements that he never imagined. This was my silent and powerful revenge. I know that many people may not understand this choice. They may think that I should have exposed everything, made a scandal, or sought retaliation. But I believe that everyone has their own way of dealing with pain. I chose peace, reconstruction, and self-love. And that, for me, was the greatest triumph. Have you ever been through something similar? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Tell me in the comments. Your story can inspire others. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to see more real stories of overcoming. Because together, we are stronger and we can transform pain into strength.